Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight, some of America's biggest companies are now imposing vaccine mandates. Is it just a matter of time before other businesses follow suit?
Black and brown people have suffered immensely.
Illinois' marijuana law is supposed to help make up for that, but is it working?
A Chicago officer arrested for an on-duty shooting at a red line stop has been charged. We share the details.
It's such a neighborly community.
How small businesses and local organizations are building community in Rogers Park.
What we really need is action.
The changes some water safety advocates want to see along the lakefront and why they're facing pushback.
Jeffrey Baer takes us back to a famous suburban dairy farm that doubled as an amusement park in tonight's Ask Jeffrey.
And a new photo exhibit documents the past and celebrates the future of women in the blues.
Brandis and Paris, I'm in Rogers Park tonight as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Now, this neighborhood was hit hard with COVID infections earlier on in the pandemic. Now, today, organizations continue those vaccination outreach efforts as the Delta variant spreads. Meanwhile, two new developments coming to this neighborhood. We'll talk to community members, business owners, and public officials about that and much more. But first, back to you in the studio.
All right, we look forward to that, Joanna. And now to some of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot launches a new crime initiative she hopes can bring down the city's high number of homicides. The mayor says that with the launch of a new resource and information hub, the aim is to better coordinate violence prevention efforts from government and nonprofit organizations to tackle violence. The center will provide data and analysis not only on violent crime and the root causes of violence, but also on things like food insecurity, power and internet connectivity, affordable housing, and access to health care.
The focus is breaking people out of their silos, bringing them together so the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, and it creates a synergy where there's information sharing, there can be innovation, and we can be more responsive to the needs of our residents.
And Illinois records its highest new COVID-19 caseload since early May. State public health officials recorded 3,048 new cases in the last 24 hours and 14 additional deaths. The 7-day test positivity rate is now up to 4.6%. Meanwhile, the state reports that 59% of all Illinoisans over 12 years old are fully vaccinated, with 67% having received at least one shot. The Cubs unveil plans for a first-in-the-nation in-stadium gambling facility. The Chicago Commission on Landmarks approved the team's design for a sportsbook facility attached to Wrigley Field at the corner of Sheffield and Addison. Cubs are seeking approval from the Commission on Chicago Landmarks today. They actually got that approval, as we said. And the team still needs approval, though, from City Council on an ordinance to allow sports betting inside pro sports stadiums. That same commission also approved landmark designation for Muddy Waters' home. If subsequently approved by City Council, the designation means the house will not be able to be torn down or significantly altered. Local groups have fought to turn it into a museum. The legendary blues man lived in that Kenwood house from 1954 to 1973. And up next, building and maintaining a sense of community in Rogers Park during a pandemic, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Rogers Park on the far north side is known as one of the city's most diverse areas, filled with restaurants and culture. It's a community that works to uplift and provide services to residents during the pandemic. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez and producer Marissa Nelson spent the day in Rogers Park as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna joins us now from the community area she actually grew up in, so who better to tell us about it? And she's got more news about new projects that are also coming to Rogers Park. Joanna.
Brandis Paris, that's right. This is the neighborhood that I was raised in. This is the area that my parents bought their first home in many years ago. I grew up going to restaurants down Clark Street. Now I get to tell you what Rogers Park is working on. Now, a street right next to this one, the Rogers Park Business Alliance is working on creating this new outdoor space for the community.
So there will be seating for the various restaurants along this strip where they can serve their constituents, and then there will be community tables. So if you're interested in getting something from a restaurant around the corner, you go there and you can come and get your food and come and sit at the community tables. Like I said, there'll be a stage. La Piano is planning on having a couple of gazebos where you can sit there and listen to music and have a drink or whatever it is. There will be events planned during the year in both of the alfresco areas. So we're on Glenwood right now, and the other one is in Jarvis Square.
The alfresco program is run by the city and is aimed at giving neighborhoods an opportunity to get creative with family-friendly outdoor public spaces. Once the city approves the Rogers Park Business Alliance proposed layout for 2 spaces, they hope to begin construction by the end of the month. The owner of Le Piano tells us this new addition to the neighborhood gives his business a chance to offer new things.
In addition to being able to, of course, seat people outside on the street, it also has given us the opportunity to create more programming for the community of Rogers Park and the communities surrounding Rogers Park.
One small business in Rogers Park has become a popular brunch spot after pandemic-related restrictions lifted. Owner Prudence Vaccination and her husband took over an old-school diner on Greenleaf Avenue and Clark Street and transformed it into a cozy brunch spot. The grand opening was short-lived when the city forced businesses to close during the height of the pandemic. She says with help from the community, they were able to stay open and adapted to the changes by offering kids free meals and linking with Love Fridge Chicago to offer food from their restaurant and any food items people were willing to donate.
I don't feel like, me personally, or me and my husband, like food shouldn't be a luxury. It's, some people take it for granted, and it should be something that like everybody should be able to eat.
Even though Clarence and her family are from the suburbs, she says they're working hard to connect with the neighborhood and help in any way they can during these difficult times.
We're here and we want to meet you, and we are we're a family coming in, and we want you to kind of join our family, basically. This, to me, I consider this like my house, literally. I spend more time here than I do my house.
Right on the border of Rogers Park entering Edgewater, Centro Romero Community Center has been helping immigrant communities from Rogers Park, Edgewater, and Uptown for more than 30 years, offering immigration services, family services, and youth programs. In fact, I was part of their youth program, and it had a big impact on my youth. Executive Director Daisy Funes shares the center typically helps around 14,000 families and is now assisting some 25,000 families.
Our community was not ready to be virtual. There's not a virtual community, and our immigrants and refugees is different. But what I can tell you is Centro Romero is doing all the efforts just to make sure information is available, vaccine is available, and our kids have and deserve good classes.
The center is now focused on bringing back regular services like in-person legal services and youth programs. In the meantime, they're continuing to fundraise for families in need of rent assistance, jobs, and food.
I think everybody's afraid. I can tell you that. We're nervous because how can we provide enough to keep a family, above this pandemic, surviving this pandemic. That's what we're doing right now, surviving the pandemic and learning.
And it appears as though the city's in this phase where organizations and people are trying to figure out what they feel comfortable doing and helping with. Now, I do want to close by touching on vaccination rates in the neighborhood. According to the Chicago's COVID dashboard, cases in the Rogers Park zip codes are slightly going up, but about 52% of the population here have received both doses of the vaccine. Now, later in the program, we'll talk to one of the area's older people about a new development in West Ridge. But for now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
All right, Joanna, thanks. We'll see you in a bit. And now, Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. Illinois today selected another 55 winners from a pool of 589 qualifying applicants seeking to open cannabis dispensaries. It's another step on a long-delayed process of growing Illinois' marijuana market with a mind towards social equity. But is it working? Amanda Vinicky joins us now. Amanda, is it?
Well, Paris, first of all, marijuana is a hot commodity. Sales have soared since recreational pot was legalized in Illinois in January of 2020. And then last month, marijuana was the most popular that it's ever been.
The state hit another record, reaching $128 million in sales in July. I'd say that's relatively unsurprising given the fact that we had more out-of-state purchasers due to Lollapalooza here in Chicago. But on top of that, we've seen really strong demand in Illinois since the market opened at the beginning of 2020. So again, we monitor all the states, and what we've seen is that Illinois has one of the largest markets for legal recreational cannabis in the country.
Now, Andrew Miller is based in Chicago, but as you heard, his firm analyzes marijuana markets across the nation. He says Illinois' market could be stronger still. Found that in Illinois, there's one cannabis dispensary for every 117,000 people. Now, in contrast, Michigan, where cannabis was legalized at about the same time as it was here, there's one pot shop for every 32,000 residents, and that is not for lack of demand. His research also found that dispensaries in Illinois are spread out enough that 1 in every 5 residents has to travel about 40 minutes round trip to buy marijuana legally. Now, those figures will change as lotteries like the one held today mean that another 185 marijuana dispensaries will soon be opening in Illinois.
It's going to be easier to get to the nearest store. Consumers are going to have more choice. And so, cannabis prices right now in Illinois are higher than pretty much anywhere else in the country. And prices result from, a bunch of different factors, including how much cannabis is grown and processed. But I think that having more stores is probably going to mean more competitive pricing for Illinois consumers.
And he says that competitive pricing will likely increase sales even more, especially because his research also found that right now, even with marijuana legal, the majority of cannabis users are still buying off the street market. Now, Illinois' slow rollout of legal dispensaries is in part intentional, but also because of mess ups in how the licenses for those coveted dispensaries were awarded. A major goal was to award licensees with an eye towards social equity. Kiana Hughes is a cannabis and social equity advocate who is trying to win one of those dispensary licenses and says what social equity means is using the licensing process as almost a sort of reparations for Black and brown people who were disproportionately hurt by the war on drugs.
We definitely make up the majority of the people who are in jail for cannabis arrests, cannabis convictions, and things of that nature. So when we talk about social equity, that is not to necessarily exclude our, non-minority counterparts, but that is definitely to say that, yeah, that is the legislative intent. The idea was to make whole the things that were lost, the things that were sacrificed.
Natasha Neptune also tried to win a state license to actually grow cannabis on the craft level, but her application was not a winner. Neptune is skeptical of this whole process and says relying on a lottery lacks credibility. These lotteries were done privately. Neptune says they should have been public.
The lack of transparency, do I really believe a lottery was held? I like to see it, to believe it.
Now, as for those lucky applicants who did win licenses or still have a chance to do so, there's some talk that some are already wanting to sell them, likely to big businesses that operate in a bunch of states. Those are known as MSOs. Neptune calls these multi-state operators piranhas.
Well, I thought people like me had a chance. And it just seems like it's going to be more of the MSOs just buying up these licenses from so-called awardees or people who were assigned these licenses.
the buying and selling of licensing, well, some have to wait, but really that's all totally legal. But Neptune says that runs counter to the law's social equity intent.
There's no safeguards in place for these licenses to be even held to social equity standards. And that just kind of went over, it just didn't get addressed. So now what's going to happen? People are going to get these so-called conditional licenses. People are going to probably most likely sell them to MSOs. And here we go again.
Kiana Hughes, however, says it is just fine by her if those who win a state license then auction it off really to the highest bidder. She says that not everyone wants to actually run a dispensary or cannabis business.
This is life-changing money. And I personally am not of the opinion that we should dictate how we go about, managing that. Once you win the license, listen, you put in the work, you do with it as you will.
She says Illinois' Black and brown communities would benefit either way. If a social equity applicant does sell a license, probably for big bucks, that money will go back into their communities and neighborhoods, she says. Now, Hughes has a few more chances to win a dispensary license. She's got a couple of applications in for the one lottery still scheduled. So you have 55 licenses awarded earlier this month and then another 55 today. August 19th, another 75 dispensary licenses will be selected by the state. At least that's as long as everything goes as planned. This whole process, again, mired in a lot of controversy, scoring questions, and lawsuits. One lawsuit still outstanding that could further delay the process. There's a hearing set for that on Monday. Paris, back to you.
All right, Amanda, still untangling all of this. Thank you very much. More employers are now mandating vaccination as a condition of returning to the office. Among them, some of the country's largest corporations, from Walmart to Tyson Foods. This as President Joe Biden announces his administration will require almost all federal employees to get vaccinated, and as the Delta variant rages across the country. But will other companies follow suit? Joining us are Andrew Challenger, Senior Vice President of Global Outplacement and Executive Coaching Firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas, and Jack Lavin, President and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you for having us, Paris.
Good to have you. Andrew Challenger, I'll start with you. So you've seen these major companies kind of start the ball rolling. What are you seeing among Chicago area companies? What percentage of them are requiring vaccinations for their employees?
Yeah, it's a pretty new phenomenon, right? We've been surveying companies throughout COVID at various different points, knowing that that the vaccine was coming and the question around mandate was coming. Less than 3% of companies consistently told us that they were going to mandate it. And so when the dam broke this week and we saw dozens of Fortune 100 companies announce that they're going to change their policies and start mandating the vaccine, really surprised us. We don't have any data on the percentage of Chicago companies yet, but certainly there will be companies that follow in the footsteps of these really large organizations.
We've certainly seen some drinking and dining establishments institute their mandates. Jack Lavin, what about from your perspective? Are you talking to Chicago companies that are members of the Chamber here considering this?
Absolutely, Paris. We're talking to companies every day. There is definitely a trend towards mandating vaccinations. We strongly encourage companies to implement policies to vaccinate their employees before they return to the office. And if they're not going to do that, have strict protocols for mask wearing and testing. And we're seeing more and more of that. We've had a number of companies this week announce mandating their employees who are returning to the office to have vaccines, like Google, Facebook, Lyft, Walgreens, Walmart, and just yesterday, Aurora Advocate Aurora Health announced all of their employees to get vaccines. And I think more and more companies, especially with the Delta variant, are moving in that direction. But every company's different. So, companies that have frontline workers, they have different things to consider and different parts of their operations consider. So this is something everybody's looking at their operations, and every company's different. of what they can do, but there's definitely, for returning to the office, there is a trend towards vaccination.
And Andrew Challenger, some U.S. appellate courts have ruled, at least in the case of universities that are mandating vaccination, that it is legal to do so, it is constitutional. Do you anticipate any kind of legal issues with employers mandating that their employees get this as a condition of coming back to work?
Well, certainly people hold their views about the vaccine really strongly. There's lots of people that are going to have a hard time if their company decides to mandate it. And so while it does seem very clear from most legal experts, this most recent case from the appellate court around Indiana University, that it is going to be legal for companies to mandate the vaccine, all of them are pretty much going to be expecting some form of lawsuit, especially if they're large enough.
Yeah, and most workers are at-will employees wherever they work. I work here. I'm subject to the rules of WTTW. Jack Lavin, do you anticipate any kind of pushback from employees? And is it fair to fire someone, as CNN reportedly did today, if they don't get the vaccine and don't comply?
I think Paris companies first want to educate their employees. And the last few years, the Edelman Trust Barometer has released that who do people trust the most? They trust their employers. And so I think it's time for business leaders and businesses to step up, educate their employees. It's not just about you as an individual. When you work for a company, when you work for anybody, it's about your fellow employees. It's about the business. It's about your community. And vaccinations have proven to be successful, to keep people healthy. And so this is not just about the individual. And I think employers and businesses are best to do that, tell their employees why it's important to move their business forward, the economy forward, and keep people in jobs and get people back to jobs. Because if we don't have more people get vaccinated or have strict masking and testing policies, we don't want the economy to turn around again. We don't want it closed down again. That we cannot have happen. It's important we educate, mandate, where we can, and require where we can. Sometimes there's religious reasons and health reasons why people can't do it. There may be other reasons, and that's why you have to have strict masking and testing policies and protocols in place, really strict, because we got to get this thing under control to keep our economy moving forward and keep people in jobs.
It seems like termination would be a last-ditch step that almost no one would want to take. Labor groups are kind of split on this. Let's hear what the Chicago Federation of Labor said today to us. They said, quote, "We're currently reviewing our affiliates' position on workplace vaccinations. However, we encourage everyone to make the decision to get vaccinated to protect themselves, their coworkers, and their families." Andrew Challenger, could this become a collective bargaining issue? You might have labor unions here saying, well, we don't think that as a union it's fair to make our workers do this. We should encourage them to do it, but maybe not make them do it.
Yeah, I think you are going to see some pushback, right? Those unions represent a lot of workers, and there are a lot of workers in the country right now that are really hesitant to get the vaccine. And so you're going to see some of them step up and represent their people in that way, almost certainly.
And Paris, I think business,
go ahead,
Paris,
Jack,
I think business and labor leaders need to step up. It's time for us to show leadership. The Trust Barometer says they believe in their employers and the leaders of their employers. They believe their labor leaders. It's time to step up, get more people vaccinated, educate them, and make sure we can move forward.
So, Jack, are you saying would you advocate these labor groups mandate vaccines for their workers?
I think that they should strongly encourage policies that require mandates to return to the office. Yes, and if they can't do that for health reasons, for religious reasons, or other reasons that pertain to their business or industry, they should have strict testing policies and strict mask policies. Listen, the largest CEOs in the country in the last few days have announced mandates. President Biden is the largest employer in the country, the federal employees, and they announced it, and strict testing policies. The CEO of Illinois, largest employer, is the state of Illinois, the governor, and he announced it. So business leaders need to step up. We need to educate and push, the science shows that this is the best way to tackle the Delta variant, get this virus under control, so that our economy can move forward, businesses can thrive, and people can stay in jobs. And it's not about the individual. We are a community, whether it's our neighborhood or our business where we work.
No doubt these are conversations many organizations in the area and across the country are having right now. And our thanks to Andrew Challenger and Jack Lavin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thank you.
And up next, to check in on new developments in Rogers Park, so please stick around.
It really is about community where we all come together.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
And now we go back to Joanna Hernandez, who spent the day reporting in Rogers Park as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
Now, thanks, Brandis. Earlier this week, I spoke with Alderwoman Deborah Silverstein of the 50th Ward, which includes parts of Rogers Park and West Ridge. Now, we started talking about a new development that's replacing the Baker Square with the strip mall on Touhy and Western Avenues. Take a listen.
Well, the people in this community were really sad to see Baker Square shut down. It's been around for a really long time, and it was really sad to see it go. We do have a new development coming in. We have a Starbucks, we have a Buffalo Wild Wings to go, and we have an Athletico. There is some more space available in the development, and we are looking to find some tenants.
And how was the feedback from the community? Did you do groundwork? Did you go out and speak with the residents in terms of what they wanted to see in this corner?
So we did have several community meetings to discuss the businesses that are going in here. Everyone has been asking me for a long time about a coffee shop, so when the opportunity for Starbucks came around, everybody was very excited about that. And we're continuing to grow the development here. And this has been blighted for a while, so I'm happy to see that something's going to be redeveloped here.
And these are larger commercial businesses coming into the area compared to smaller businesses. What would you say that bigger companies like Buffalo Wild Wings and Starbucks will have in this community?
So everyone's welcome in this community, and if you know the 50th Ward, it is a very diverse ward. We have big businesses, we have mom and pop businesses, and that's what adds to the diversity and the uniqueness of this ward. I'm hoping that with the bigger developments that they're going to be hiring people from within, around our community. It's important that everybody gets jobs. So I'm hoping that we'll see that with these new developments.
Any idea in terms of how many jobs will be created with these new developments?
I don't know right now.
Okay, and do you have a time frame in terms of when people can start seeing these businesses come in the area?
So it took us a while to get this demolished, so I'm hoping that the construction's going to start soon. But again, I don't have an actual date for you right now.
But it's said it's coming to this neighborhood.
It's coming, yes.
Now, in other related news, carjackings have been a big issue, not only around the city, but here in Rogers Park. What is your office doing to address this issue?
So it's been really scary for people here. I have been working with the police department with the 24th District. They have made 2 arrests. The message from the police and what I've been trying to put out on my social media is don't sit in your car. You know, everybody likes to drive and then they get home and want to pick up their phone and look at their messages. But please, take your phone, go in the house, and look at your messages in the house. Don't stay in your car.
Is that the #1 tip that you're giving the community when you're out and they bring this concern to you?
Well, always be aware of your surroundings, always. But, you know, until we've got the situation under control, you know, just be extra vigilant.
All right, thank you. Now, and another question, back to school is right around the corner, and you're on the education committee. Last year was an unconventional year, to say the least, and this upcoming year will still be marked by the pandemic. So what do you hope to see happen as the new school year gets underway?
Well, we were hoping that we wouldn't have the Delta variant upon us now, and that's really scary for everybody. There's this new mandate for masking indoors. I just want everybody to be safe, and that's the goal. We need to get our kids educated, and we need them to be safe and healthy.
Can you share what some of the concerns that the residents come up to you and share with you?
Again, safety and education. Everybody wants the best for their children. They're our pride and joy, and we always want the best for them.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with your community?
I just want everybody to continue to get out there, get their vaccines. It's really important that we get this coronavirus under control. Make sure to go if you haven't already. Make sure to continue to be careful, wear your masks, and just make sure that everybody's staying safe.
And we'll be back to talk to the area's other elder woman in just a bit. But first, back to you.
Joanna, thanks. I'm sure some folks in the neighborhood are excited about the new developments that are coming their way. Thank you. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, some water safety advocates want rescue flotation devices along the lakefront, but the Park District isn't sold on the idea. A Chicago police officer faces charges after an on-duty shooting at the Cta Red Line Station last year. Jeffrey Bayer on what's left of a treasured dairy farm and amusement park that once stood in Chicago's northern suburbs in tonight's Ask Jeffrey. And arts correspondent Angel Edo shares details on a photo exhibit documenting the past and celebrating the future of women in blues. But first, some more of today's top stories. As the number of COVID cases continues to rise after the summer's decline, Illinois has hit a new high, recording more than 3,000 cases today. That's the highest number since early May of this year, when 3,300 cases were recorded. The state's 7-day positivity rate is now 4.6%. That's up from 1.9 in mid-July. And the same is true in Chicago, where test positivity is at 3.5%, up from 0.4 in late June. Violence reduction organizations and nonprofits are partnering with the city of Chicago to respond to violence in the same way it responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. It starts with a community safety coordination center.
As part of the Community Safety Coordination Center approach, the city will utilize best practices from the COVID-19 pandemic to implement a whole of government community-driven approach to violence prevention and reduction.
Officials say the center will be a hub to coordinate health care and mental health organizations, violence reduction nonprofits, youth services, faith groups, and more. The teams will identify violence prevention strategies already in place and figure out where city departments can provide better resources to reduce violent crime, both short and long term. And new laws in Illinois take aim at so-called period poverty, making it easier for some women to have access to feminine hygiene products.
Across the country, 1 in 4 women regularly struggle to purchase menstrual products due to the lack of income. Today in Illinois, we're taking the steps to help low-income menstruators in our state overcome that burden.
And to that end, Governor J.B. Pritzker today signed 3 different bills. One requires homeless shelters to provide sanitary napkins, tampons, and panty liners free of charge if their budget allows. Another requires public universities and community colleges to stock campus bathrooms with feminine hygiene products, also free of charge. And the third requires the state to apply for a federal waiver that would allow people receiving SNAP and WIC benefits to eventually use those funds for menstrual products as well. Lake Michigan is one of Chicago's biggest attractions, and while it's scenic, it's also sometimes dangerous. For years, some water safety advocates and the Chicago Park District have been debating how to stop people from drowning and dying in Lake Michigan. Advocates are pushing for measures they say would combat one of the leading causes of death for children, one that disproportionately affects communities of color. But as Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, the Park District says it's not so simple.
On July 10, 2018, 55-year-old Horacio Leon Jr. took his bike down to the lakefront near Jackson Drive.
How he ended up in the water is still a mystery, but I do know that the water took him.
Jessica Leon says her father was in the water for 7 minutes before bystanders were able to pull him out.
For 13 days, he was in the ICU. He was in Northwestern Hospital. And on July 23rd, he passed away. Since then, I've been working religiously to get water rescue stations placed along the shoreline.
She's not alone. Hallie Quesada witnessed a 13-year-old girl whose family she knew drowned at a Rogers Park beach in 2018. She says people on the shore searched frantically for anything that would float.
It was just chaos in those moments, and there was absolutely nothing available to help.
Quesada launched a petition and started publicly advocating for changes. Water rescue flotation devices like the life preservers already posted at harbors and near the river, restored lifeguard hours, numbered beaches and break walls so people can easily give their location if they call 911 about a swimmer in distress. In 2018, the city created a water safety task force that included Quesada.
There are safety protections that are pretty easy and obvious that we simply don't have.
Quesada says there's broad agreement on the task force about the kinds of things that would make the lakefront safer, but that after years of meetings, there just hasn't been enough measurable change. So she's back to public pressure. A new petition's garnered 3,000 signatures, and she and Leon have been making their case directly to the Park District Board. At an April board meeting, the top attorney for Park said adding life preserver rings along the lakefront isn't so simple.
When we do put up certain measures, you are increasing your risk of liability by representing that those areas have been determined to be, swimmable or usable areas. From a legal standpoint, the best thing to do right now is nothing, because that's the only way to not take on that increased risk of liability.
Nadav Shoked, a Northwestern law professor who studies local government issues, understands the Park District's position on flotation devices.
Say they're under-maintained, and a person is using one of those life preserves, and because it's under-maintained, he or she drowns, then the Park District could be sued.
Advocates say the answer to that is simple: maintain the equipment. But Shoked says the rescue devices are also problematic from a policy perspective, which the president of the Park District Board echoed at its May meeting.
Our argument is not about liability. What it really is about making sure that people are observing the rules to not swim where they're not supposed to swim, and at times they're not supposed to swim. If we put these rings where we tell people not to swim, that's winking at us telling people not to swim there.
But Quesada and Leon say people are already in the water when and where they're not supposed to be. Others may not be able to read warning signage written in English. Some fall into the water.
I'm not encouraging people to go into the water, but this is something that is needed. If there would have been a life ring, a water rescue station near where my father ended up drowning, there's no doubt in my mind.
Since things with the Park District appear to have come to an impasse, Quesada says getting state and local lawmakers on board is likely the next step.
If we can't compel park districts to protect our kids to a leading cause of death for their age group, then we'll look to compel them to protect our kids because they have to by law.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
And the Chicago Park District did not respond to multiple requests for comment. And now to Paris Schutz with details on an officer-involved shooting. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. A Chicago police officer is facing criminal charges after an on-duty shooting of a man inside a Cta Red Line Station last year. WTTW News reporter Matt Masterson joins us now with more. Hey, Matt, so who is the officer charged here, and what are the charges?
So this is 32-year-old Melvina Bogard. She surrendered this morning to the Cook County State's attorney's investigators and was charged with aggravated battery with a firearm and official misconduct stemming from the non-fatal shooting of Ariel Roman inside the CTA Grand Red Line Station back in February of 2020.
And take us back to the day of that shooting in 2020. What exactly happened?
Sure. So a video of this surfaced just a few days after the incident itself and showed this very chaotic scene inside the Red Line stop there. But Bogard and her partner had stopped Roman after seeing him jump between cars on a CTA train. They took him off the train. He refused to show his ID, and a physical confrontation sort of began between Bogard's partner and Roman. They wrestled each other to the ground, and both officers tried to tase Roman and use pepper spray, but it didn't really have much of an effect. At one point, Roman got off the ground and started to wipe his eyes from the pepper spray and took a step towards Bogard, at which point she allegedly shot him in the chest. Roman then turned and started to run up the escalator stairs to get away, and Bogard followed and allegedly fired a second shot that hit him in the lower extremities, and then he collapsed at the top of the stairs and was taken into custody by other police officers who were on scene there.
And so what's next for Bogard?
So today she was released on a recognizance bond, meaning she didn't need to pay any money to actually be released from jail. And she's due back in court on August 18th. But after the shooting, she was stripped of her police powers. And earlier this year, the Chicago Police Department moved to file administrative charges against both her and her partner and are seeking to have her terminated from the department. That process is still ongoing.
And the FOP has fought a lot of these kinds of cases. Do they have any reaction to this specific case?
Well, her attorney in court today is a FOP attorney, and he was arguing that this was a clear-cut self-defense case, that Bogard acted within the guidelines that the department has trained her on, and that she did nothing wrong or out of the ordinary in the shooting.
All right, we'll have to follow this. Thanks, Matt.
Yep, thanks.
And you can read Matt's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. And now we check back in with Joanna Hernandez, who spent the day reporting in Rogers Park on the city's north side as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna, what do you got?
Now that's right, Paris. Now we are here with Alderwoman Maria Haddon from the 49th Ward, which covers most of Rogers Park. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Well, thank you for joining us. Now, first off, you just came back from a neighborhood meeting, right, about change residents want to see in the community. What did you hear from them?
People, they want to see better solutions. I think hot topic this week, and it came up at tonight's meeting, was how we can help houseless residents. We've got several homeless individuals living at Tui Park. That was a big incident this weekend, or this week, as you know, folks from the Park District came to do some clearing. We have a lot of residents who've been organizing to support our neighbors. A lot of people are afraid about evictions coming. And so tonight, hot topic was, what can we do about policies for our houseless folks? And another big topic tonight was about, what are we doing for policies to prepare for climate change? Yeah, so always forward thinking, a little bit of the here and present, and then thinking a little bit forward about what we can do. And I think people are interested in not just what we can do in the 49th Ward, but what can we do in Chicago?
No, that's right. Now, one issue likely on the top of everyone's mind is, of course, COVID and the Delta variant. How concerned are you about its potential impact on the city? And here in Rogers Park, your ward was hit particularly hard in the beginning, especially with those Black and brown communities. So what are you doing to move forward and address this?
So some of the things are what we haven't stopped doing, right? So even with the opening up and getting back to going to businesses and getting folks ready for back to school, we've been really consistent through our office to encourage people to get vaccinated, remind people about masking. These last couple of weeks especially, you know, we started a little bit early. My family and I tend to be a little more cautious maybe than others, but reminding people about vaccine opportunities and about wearing our masks. Some of the conversations we've had with some of our small businesses over this last week in particular have been figuring out what kind of things they might do to prepare. A lot of people are worried about whether we'll go to another shutdown. So trying to encourage people, knowing that if we make our changes now, we can avoid a shutdown, I believe. But that's kind of been the conversations over the last couple of weeks. But we moved into action very quickly in 2020, set up a community response team with local volunteers and our partner organization, Northside Community Resources. And some of the talk in my office has been trying to prepare about whether we might have to do something like that soon in the future.
No, of course. And we see other local governments like New York City requiring vaccines to enter restaurants or fitness centers. Should something similar be implemented here in Chicago?
I would love to see something similar implemented here in Chicago. I know that our mayor and public health commissioner have indicated that it's tricky. I do think it's tricky everywhere, but I can tell you I just passed a business on my way here that started requiring vaccines in order to enter inside today. Leaving it up to the individual businesses, especially in Rogers Park, we have so many independently owned small businesses, I think puts a bit of a burden on them, and also means that we don't have consistent policies across the city. I think the city of Chicago should have a vaccine and at minimum a mask mandate.
Of course, and last question here, we are 18 months in. You know, what do you want to tell your community now moving forward? We've been dealing with this for 18 months. What would you like to tell them?
We're going to get through this. I've been very proud of the Rogers Park community, of folks doing everything they can to, one, help one another, to adapt to this crisis, to learn as much as possible. We're blessed to have several wonderful community organizations that have gone out of their way to help folks in need. We've got to continue to be resilient, we've got to continue to be creative, and we've got to continue to mask up as we move forward.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Well, that is all we have here in Rogers Park. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Joanna, thank you. So Alderwoman Maria Hadden there supporting a mask mandate and vaccine mandate in this city. And up next, what's left of a suburban dairy farm and amusement park in an encore edition of Ask Jeffrey.
What does a 20th century electricity baron have to do with a spitting llama at a suburban petting zoo? Jeffrey Bear is here with the story of the Hawthorne Melody Dairy Farm in this week's Ask Jeffrey. Hello, Jeffrey, and welcome back.
I'll try not to spit.
Please don't, llama. So this question comes from viewer Tom McLean, and the question is, when I was a kid, my classmates took a field trip to the Hawthorne Melody Dairy Farm. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend. What did I miss out on?
Oh, Tom, you missed out on a lot, but after all these years, we're going to make it up to you right now. So here we go. The former Hawthorne Melody Farm was both a working dairy and a very popular tourist attraction in Chicago's northern suburbs, straddling Vernon Hills and Libertyville. Okay, not only did they offer tours of the dairy, but they also ran an amusement park with a Wild West town, and there was a petting zoo, and we're going to get to all of that in just a minute. The origins of Hawthorne Melody can be traced back to someone you may have heard of. No, not Teddy Roosevelt, the other guy standing next to him in this 1917 photo, Samuel Insull, founder of Commonwealth Edison, which of course today we call ComEd. Insull was one of many early 20th century moguls who built country estates in Lake and DuPage counties with so-called hobby farms, which were really just a way for the owners to dabble in the farm life. Insull oversaw a Midwest electricity empire. It was a monopoly that provided almost all of Chicago's electricity in the early 20th century and controlled electric railroads, including the L system. All that splendor came crashing down during the Great Depression when Insull's companies went bust, and his small-time mom-and-pop investors did too. Many of them lost their life savings. Insull, after that, became a poster child for social inequity in the 1930s. He fled to Europe. He was eventually extradited back to Chicago. He was tried for fraud and embezzlement, but he survived all that and moved back to Europe, where he died.
Wow, what a story, Jeffrey. So what became of the farm after Insull?
Well, in the late 1930s, the property was purchased by a man named John Cuneo Sr., who was a printing company magnate, and he had a wide range of business interests. Cuneo bought up surrounding farmland, and he really expanded the dairy operation, and he kept the original, or part at least of the original Hawthorne Farm name. The dairy and the farm raised horses and hogs and poultry, but the big business was those dairy cows. At its peak, the company distributed milk and other products all over the Chicago region. I'm going to date myself right now. I totally remember these milk trucks when I was a kid. Hawthorne Melody welcomed thousands of families and school groups, and they marveled at the dairy's newfangled mechanized milking process, which was advertised as, quote, free of human touch. And then there was that amusement park I talked about, including the Wild West town, officially known as Hawthorne Gulch, which featured an old-time bank, a general store, and covered wagons. It was one of the stops on a miniature steam railroad that took visitors on tours of the property. And I went there when I was a kid. I totally remember this. And I remember the Wild West town had this little sort of boot hill cemetery with these wooden tombstones with those funny epitaphs like I told you I was sick, and quick on the trigger, but slow on the draw. And then, of course, there was that petting zoo, sometimes called a children's zoo, and they had turkeys and ducks, and reportedly, as you mentioned in the introduction, a very popular spitting llama. I don't know why that made the llama popular. And check this out, even circus animals like this elephant, I'm not sure any zoo today would allow people, especially children, to get this close to a wild animal.
Yeah, even if it's a baby elephant. I bet the spitting llama was popular with the kids, though. So Jeffrey Hawthorne Melody, no longer around today. What happened to it?
Yeah, well, so in the late 1960s, Mr. Cuneo, began selling off portions of the dairy and the land. The amusement park closed in the 1970s after the attendance started to sag. Now, the Hawthorne Melody brand continued to exist under various corporate owners until it finally was phased out, or it fizzled out in the early 1990s. Today, most of that Vernon Hills property has been thoroughly suburbanized, home to subdivisions, and of course, the Hawthorne Mall, a small nod to what used to be there. But the shocking pink Cuneo mansion by the famous architect Benjamin Marshall and the Jens Jensen designed grounds, all that is still there. And that's been open for tours, actually, for many years. The site is now owned and operated as a conference center and an event space by Loyola University Chicago. And check this out. We found at least one trace of Hawthorne Melody left in Chicago. Look at this ghost sign on a building near Horner Park on the north side. Looks like it might at one time have been a corner grocery.
Oh, wow. I learn something new every time, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to have you.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
My pleasure.
And don't forget that you can visit our website for more details about Hawthorne Melody. And while you're there, don't forget to submit your own question to Jeffrey Baer. That's at WTTW.com/AskJeffrey. We're back with more right after this.
As murals and music festivals continue to honor a music genre that calls Chicago home, a traveling photo exhibit is making sure certain artists receive their recognition as well. Arts correspondent Angel Ito recently shared how one photographer is using snapshots of time to pay tribute to the women of the blues. Here's another look.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's what Lynn Orman Weiss's traveling photo exhibition, Women of the Blues, have contributed to one of the most influential music genres.
Chicago is, I would like to say, sort of the portal. You know, it's a significant city for women of the blues.
This collection of historic snapshots is 6 years in the making and features more than 100 women, including Coco Taylor.
Coco Taylor, being our Chicago queen of the blues, played such a significant role in influencing and empowering the voices of the next generation of women, and she was my inspiration for this show.
The blues is what she loved. The blues is what she lived, but not how she lived.
Taylor's daughter, Joyce, agrees and says her mother, who grew up in the church and started as a gospel singer, remained true to herself and her faith while working with blues legend Willie Dixon.
Even in the making of Wang Dang Doodle for her, she refused to sing it because it was a lot about like the Dirty Dozen. And my mother said, I just can't sing that song. And Dixon said, you just don't understand. And she said, well, some of them words you got to change because I just can't sing that.
Also featured is up-and-coming artist Melody Angel, who says learning this history is imperative to her development as an artist.
Not only are you honoring the genre, but you're honoring the people who created it. Because for me, learning about my history, learning about music history, built me up in such a way. My self-esteem was built up by knowing that I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived and they invented and created things that we all love today.
You were a little girl when, really.
Yeah, you were little.
Yeah. Good to see you, boo.
From Chicago to St. Louis to Memphis, this exhibit not only celebrates artists who've laid the foundation for the genre, but also the photographers who have documented these musical celebrations across the country for decades.
We're usually in the pit right now, starting today at Blues Fest, elbow to elbow, camera to camera, lenses to lenses, shooting these remarkable women. So I wanted to give a voice also to the photographers because I'm one of them, and everybody captures the essence of the performer differently. And it's really, it becomes this beautiful narrative on who they are.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And the exhibit finished its run at the Delmark Records Gallery earlier this summer and has a few stops before heading to Bronzeville this fall. Visit our website for more information on how to see Women of the Blues, and there you'll also find more out about featured artists and the photographers behind those pictures. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing, and you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube. Of course, you know this part. We all can. You can get it. I can get it. You can all get it. Also, our website, WTTW.com/news.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Weekend Review.
And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, weekend's almost over here. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.